This is a second-hand account, but it just happened to my son, his father, and stepmother, and I'm curious if anyone has seen anything similar. His dad says he was sitting around a fire with his wife and our son asleep on his shoulder. He saw a blurry white figure that he described as looking like a KKK member, but taller, about 600 feet away. It would come out of the woods about 10 feet and stop, and then go back into the woods. He said he watched it for quite a while, maybe 2 minutes, before saying anything to his wife, mostly because he couldn't believe his eyes. He said, "Hannah, look over there." And she looked and said quietly, "What the fuck is that?" As soon as she said that, it darted back into the woods as if it heard her. He woke our son up and said, "A monster is in the woods, we're going inside." Not the best thing to say to a 10-year-old, but whatever, they were scared. When my son woke up, it came back out again, and he saw it too. Any ideas are welcome. The other day, I was at work, and a little girl says, "Hey, Johnny's going home." There were no cars in sight, and no parent had called, and Johnny wasn't supposed to leave for another hour, so I said, "Well, not yet, but he will in a few hours." And she was very sure Johnny was going home. 5 minutes later, I get a call from the kid's mom. He had a family emergency and was going home. I thought it was a weird coincidence until it kept happening with different random things, so I asked her parents about it, and they said, "Yeah, she always knows stuff right before it happens. It's very creepy, but she's always right." So the next time it happened, I asked her, "How do you always know what's going to happen?" And she replies, "There's a crack in my brain and all the secrets go in." I come from a village called Vega in a small island in the Caribbean called Trinidad. We had a saying in my village, when a person dies in Vega, they drag down 2 others with them, or simply, people die in 3s in Vega. When I was a young boy, an old man from my street named Sundar died. He was drunk and fell out the passenger door of a truck while it was driving. It rolled over him. Directly across the street from Sundar was a mentally unstable man whose wife and children had left him. He committed suicide by drinking herbicide days after Sundar died. Apparently, he didn't dilute it either. The spot on the sidewalk where he vomited was grass-free for almost a year after he died, while grass grew all around it. I would stand on that clean spot for the bus. A guy from next door also died the following week. 3 men from 3 close-by houses within a few days of each other. Fast forward to last year, my Uncle Suk died from a stroke. During the wake, I heard one of my cousins say, "Let's wait and see who Suk drags down with him." The following week, another of my relatives died from COVID. Imagine a main street with 3 side streets on the right side. My Uncle Suk died in his home, the 3rd house in the 1st street. My other relative died in his home, the 3rd house in the 3rd street. Because it was a COVID death, we couldn't gather at the house of mourning for fear of folks catching the virus, so we all gathered at my cousin's house, which, incidentally, was the 3rd house in the 2nd street. During the wake, I realized we were directly in the middle and all 3 houses were in a straight line, even though they were on 3 different streets. I joked that since our uncle died in the house a street down and our uncle died in the house a street prior and the house we were at was lined up perfectly in the middle, that the people living in that house should be careful to not complete the 3. It was just a joke. We all laughed. My cousin from that house died in a car accident the next week. People die in 3s in Vega. This happened quite a few years ago when I was in grade 6. I used to live in an old acreage with my dad, grandma, and grandpa. My cousin was staying with us to try and finish his high school education. I had dinner and went upstairs, watched Barnyard a few times on my old CD player, and decided to tuck myself into bed for the night as there was school the next day. I suddenly woke up feeling anxious around 3 a.m. from what I remember. I looked around my room and froze when I saw a tall human shadow in my doorway. I tried rubbing my eyes because I thought it was one of those moments when you still have sleep in your eyes, but it was still there, looming in my doorway. I called out to it thinking it was my cousin a few times, but it didn't move an inch or say anything. After a few more calls, I went back to bed, hiding under my covers. If I can't see it, it can't see me kind of thing. I woke up around 3:30 a.m. next, peeking over my covers, and I saw it again, but this time it was closer to me. I called out to my cousin and my dad this time, thinking it was one of them messing around with me. I said that it wasn't funny and to leave me alone, otherwise I'd tell my grandpa. But again, it didn't move or say anything. It just stood there. I started crying and cocooned myself into my blanket, only to wake back up at 4 a.m. It was at the foot of my bed, and I started bawling my eyes out only to feel a bad burning sting on my ankle area. That instant, I jumped up and ran to the door and turned on the light. I looked back to my bed thinking I caught my cousin, but nothing was there, and when I looked to my ankle, I had a cut going down to my heel. I have no clue if I was just going crazy and cut myself in my paranoia and didn't actually see anything. But if I did see something and it actually was there, I have no clue what it was, and that's what makes me scared still, to this day. Hello, everyone. My name is Revan, and I'm a 28-year-old girl, and I just moved into a new house about 4 months ago. And for a little background on the house, before it was a house, it was a funeral home from 1971 until 2013 when it was converted into a house. Now it seems the house is pretty active. I've experienced quite a few things in the 4 months I've been here. I've heard children laughing, knocking, seen shadows, and heard what sounded like a woman's voice. I've been okay with the activity for the most part until last night's experience when I saw something that really creeped me out. When I got up out of bed to go get a glass of water and stepped out into the hallway, I saw a woman. She was wearing a white t-shirt and blue jeans and was barefoot. She had reddish-brown hair, and she was soaking wet. I asked her what she was doing in my hallway and what she wanted. She looked up at me very slowly and smiled at me and then said she was just visiting. Then she just vanished into thin air. I checked all the doors to make sure they were all locked, and they were, so there's no way anybody could have gotten inside. The vibe I got from her was very creepy. I don't know if she was human or not. The way she smiled at me was like, I'm much more powerful than you and could hurt you if I wanted to, but I don't. It wasn't exactly a hateful feeling as much as it was creepy and unnerving. I felt very small and outmatched. If any of you have any ideas as to what she is and if I'm in any danger, I'd appreciate it. Okay, so my local football team had their first preseason game today, and I went to go see it. At halftime, I go to refill my water at a fountain. Because it's preseason, the stadium's barely half full, so there's a few people around me, but no one in my near vicinity. Suddenly, mid-stride, I feel what felt like someone tapping in the middle of my right sole. Then simultaneously, a voice that sounded like a 6-year-old girl who'd been smoking darts for 40 years whispers, "Run!" I immediately turned around to see who was messing with me, but there was no one. I didn't run, but proceeded to fill my water bottle and watch the rest of a rather disappointing game. The voice I heard is currently keeping me up. I struggle to find the words to describe it. I called it a whisper, but it was loud and clear. It was 1,000,000 miles away and echoey, but also centimeters from my ear. I've always been a hesitant believer, and this wasn't my first encounter with something I couldn't explain, but it was the first time where it felt targeted and intentional. Was this a warning of something to come, or a sign that my home team was going to get their ass handed to them? I don't think I'll ever know, and if I do, I hope I don't figure it out too late. Basic backstory. I've seen a lot of spooky things in my lifetime. It seems to follow me. I stopped physically seeing it a while ago, but at the last house it got really bad. To be clear, other people had experiences too. Most of it was auditory for me as an adult. Think sighs in an empty room, I've heard screaming a few times and indistinct whispers, but it was infrequent. Occasionally stuff went missing only to show up random places. Once my keys went missing and showed up on my Christmas tree. My daughter saw some hardcore shit similar to what I've seen as a kid. She's almost 13. Other outside people experience things whilst visiting as well. I won't go into all the details, but things seen have included black tall man, not hat man, he wasn't wearing a hat but presents similarly, an old hag with gray skin, no eyes, and a girl who low-key looks like the chick from The Ring, but the first time I saw her I was 7, and it was at least 6 to 7 years before those types of movies came out. I didn't tell my kid about what I saw, but around age 5 to 6, she started periodically seeing the same things. Also, my parents were religious, and at that point I was not exposed to any horror stuff that could have influenced me. Quick note, when I saw things the most as a kid, I did see a psychiatrist, and I was deemed fine, though they thought it was just night terrors. I still see a psychiatrist just for maintenance appointments. History of regular depression and anxiety, which is currently 100% controlled with no meds. And I've never shown signs of psychosis. My daughter sees a professional for ADHD and also has no history of psychosis or hallucinations. So now that we've established I'm not having a mental breakdown, on to the story. We moved about a year ago, and things basically stopped. It's followed a few places, comes and goes at random times, stopping for sometimes months at a time, but never this long, so we thought we were safe. Yesterday, I was cleaning the kitchen. I saw my youngest kid, 2, in her teal-blue sleeper, walk into my eldest kid's room, only a few feet away from me. I noticed she was not making any noise, which was weird. She even looked at me and gave a small smile as she waltzed in. I immediately told my 13-year-old her baby sister was in her room. She was in there within 30 seconds from the living room, and the 2-year-old wasn't in there. I was confused. We go to my room at the opposite end of the hall. The 2-year-old was where we left her. Then I noticed something. She was wearing her pink sleeper that day and not the teal one I just saw her in. I was freaked out. Today comes, nothing eventful for me. My 13-year-old tells me last night she saw a dark shadow figure standing at the foot of her bed for several minutes. She thought she felt something poke her. She told it to go away and went back to sleep. During the day today, she definitely felt a finger touch her hand while she was in her room alone listening to music. Nothing else eventful happened the rest of the day. Tonight rolls around. I have 4 kids total. My middle 2, 4 and 6, share a room. The 4-year-old has been asleep for hours in her bed. The 2-year-old has been asleep for hours on the couch. The 13-year-old is in her room getting ready for sleep. The 6-year-old is on the spectrum and has ADHD, so she's up late often. Around 11 p.m., she is in bed watching a show on her device. My husband gets up at 5, so he's in our bed in our room. I was washing dishes in the kitchen so I could carry the 2-year-old to her bed and I could go to sleep. All of a sudden, the 6-year-old yells for me. Her overhead light is on. She said someone turned on her light, but she's comfortable and wants me to turn it off so she doesn't have to get up. These lights are those sideways switches, which take a good bit of pressure to switch on. You can't just flip it. You have to push one side. Everyone is accounted for. I asked her if she saw who turned on her light, and she said no, she was looking at her screen. I heard the click right before she yelled. No way she ran to her bed before I got there and made no noise. Also, she doesn't know about the spooky stuff, so she has absolutely zero reason to lie or try to make up a story. Also, she's at the age where she doesn't play pranks. Her humor is all about poop, etc. Anyway, not sure why something is back, but it obviously is. We had little luck with smoke or sage cleanses at the last house. Any advice on what this may be and why it's back? Most importantly, how do we permanently delete it? We don't play with Ouija or anything, but we did use tarot like a week ago. Also, my 2-year-old was in the hospital for 6 days with low oxygen due to human Boca virus and just got home a week and a half ago. Not sure if either is related. Final note. Before people ask, I live in an historical building that doesn't allow for anyone to own or operate gas heaters, etc. Everything here is electric, and there's no chance it's carbon monoxide. I'm not feeling depressed. I don't have feelings of paranoia, despite the occasional spooky feeling. Also, nothing is speaking to me or telling me to do things, and I'm showing no signs of schizophrenia. I'm in a very good frame of mind. No signs of mania, and I'm not sleep-deprived. I've ruled out normal things that could be causing these occurrences. Hi. I don't necessarily believe in the paranormal. There are things that make me think the paranormal exists and things that don't. Anyways, about an hour and a half ago, I was about to fall asleep when I hear a loud bang sound in my house. I was surprised and a little worried at first, since I have anxiety and get paranoid sometimes. However, I wrote it off since my house creaks and makes popping sounds sometimes due to wind or fluctuation in the structure for whatever reason. I will say this bang was shockingly loud, but I thought since I was tired, maybe it seemed louder than it was. I guess the reason I add this is because it was just the most off-putting bang I've ever heard in my house. Anyways, I tried to fall asleep again, but was having a hard time. I opened my eyes, and after a second, a light appeared on my wall in my house. It wasn't super bright, but bright enough that it seemed like it was coming directly from a light source, not a reflection, since it's a very dark night tonight. No moonlight or something that could shine through a window. The light was in a specific spot in a well-defined shape, also not in a position that natural light could reach like that even if the moon was bright. And like I said, I literally saw it appear out of nowhere. I looked around in the house and out my windows to see if there was a source it could be coming from regardless, but everything was completely dark inside and out. I moved my eyes around and blinked a bunch to make sure it wasn't a straight-up hallucination. I've never seen a light like that. I thought maybe I was delirious from being tired, but I felt pretty awake at that point. Plus, I sat up and looked at this light for a while before again deciding maybe it was nothing. Then right before I gave up on seeing if it would go away or change or anything, as I was staring at it, it disappeared again, just like someone turned it off. I know it sounds dumb and sounds menial, but it genuinely makes no sense to me, which scares me. I am a very logical person, and the only reason this is weirding me out is because I can't explain it like I can explain things that normally happen. Bangs and pops and shadows and whatnot. I really don't understand, and I can't sleep now. I was jungle perch fishing at the Black Rocks waterfalls in Mowbray, far north Queensland. To get to the waterfalls, you have to walk up the creek that eventually leads to the waterfalls. The walk is about 3 kilometers long. There is no set path to take you, so you find yourself walking up on both creek sides or in the actual creek itself. Plenty of rock hopping and wading through water that was chest deep. Going up was immaculate. Caught lots of fish, recharged myself from the stress of life. It was raining, and there was no one else for the whole day in the area apart from one family that passed me because I took my time fishing each deeper pool for the JP. The family had already made their way to the top, then left when I was still making my way up, so I was truly alone then. Once I had gotten to the main waterfall, I had a bit of a rest and relaxed there. All was well until I started getting an unnerved feeling that something or someone was watching me. I mostly brush this off because you do tend to get these types of feelings being alone in the bush. After my rest, I started making my way down the creek. However, the feeling did not leave. It wasn't overwhelmingly strong, so I kept brushing it off. I decided that I would only fish the main pools that I had some luck in on the way up. Also, you don't catch as many JP downstream due to them mostly looking upstream for prey. After walking about 300 meters from the main waterfall, I wasn't getting much luck, so I sat down on a flat spot and changed the lure on my rod. This is when it started to get very strange. As soon as I stood up, I had this unearthly smell fill my nostrils. It's something you can't describe. Personally, it felt more like an experience rather than a direct smell from something, if that makes sense. If I was going to compare it to a smell, it would be similar to really bad-smelling sweat mixed with rotting flesh and fruit and wet car, carpet, dog. After half a second of smelling this, I instantly went into this very confused trance. I didn't know where I was, briefly, and felt very confused and lightheaded. I would say this lasted for around 4 to 5 seconds, but it could have been longer as I didn't really have a sense of time during it. I remembered snapping out of the trance I was in whilst looking at my rod. The instant I snapped out of it, I felt all the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Some people say this is a play on words or expression, but this feeling was different. My upper back and neck went extremely tingly, and I could literally feel my neck hairs stand up. This was paired with the most intense get the fuck out of there feeling I have ever experienced. It wasn't just an instinctive, horrible feeling. It was pure doom, like all the fear in the world was projected onto me in one single shot. I knew instantly that whatever that was did not want me there, and I knew that in my whole entire being. I was so convinced something was there that I verbally apologized for being there and said I was leaving. The trouble was, it was 2.7 kilometers back to my car, and moving downstream is a lot harder than upstream, so it was a very long, painful, and paranoid walk back. The whole way it felt like someone or something was following and watching me. I thought I heard a scream or a screech on 2 occasions, but it was so hard to tell with the loud gushing water. With each step I moved away from the initial spot that the experience happened, that feeling would subside. I was about 3/4 of the way back to the car, and I gained enough courage and curiosity to see if I could maybe communicate with whatever it was, or at least catch a glimpse of what was there. I stopped, turned around, and was about to walk back upstream, literally about to take my first step, when the feeling of intense doom punched me in my face again, but with only about 1/4 of the strength from the first time. It was like it was warning me again not to come back. With that, I accepted my fate and made my way back to the car, still shaken from what just happened. As I was walking on the off-road track back to the car, the owner of the nearby property was near the entrance and was about to mow his lawn. I stopped for a chat and asked him if he has had any weird experiences around the area. He looked at me with a cheeky smile and blatantly said that I wasn't the only one that has had an experience like that here. He said that around 5 times a year he will be stopped by a shaken tourist or local that have just soiled their jocks. He said around the same time last year a couple had a very similar experience to mine. He seems to think it's around the wet season when there aren't so many people on the track. He mentioned that at night he has heard what he thought was pigs screaming around his yard. Said it didn't sound like a pig, but that's what he logically thought. Then, as he went to check for any crop or ground destruction from them in the morning, there was nothing. He also had moments when the curlews would be going off their nutters screaming, then all the birds would fly away from the trees, then just eerie silence. He also mentioned there has been many Yowie, Australian Bigfoot, sightings around that area. I found out later from an Aboriginal elder living in the Mowbray area that was sacred land to the Aboriginal people, and men are not meant to go there as it was a birthing place for women. After my experience, I had to sit in my car and collect my thoughts on what just happened, away from the area, of course. I'm thinking about going back with a mate in the near future. Hello, little Vickies. Thanks for listening. If you like what you heard and you haven't subscribed already, please do subscribe and hit the like button, as they're both very helpful to my growth here on YouTube. I'm trying to get up to 500 subscribers, and I know we can do it. If you have something to say or just want to say hello, please leave a comment. I love to hear what you guys have to say. If you have a story of your own you'd like to share and possibly have read on the channel, send it to me at veronica45stories@gmail.com. Link is also in the description, as are other ways to support the channel if you feel so inclined. I post as often as I can every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday by 5 p.m. Pacific. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it beyond measure. And until next time, be good.